So I think that today's agenda is first is basically what I talked about, like how do you take the problem and what is the process of doing it? Like you have an idea, you have a problem, you've thought about how do you take it to a real business as well as how do you validate with the real people who will be consuming it, whether it's a real issue and what is the value you're creating. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of what we call as the business model canvas. And actually Mariana has developed a really sort of interactive exercise for you guys as to give you an example of a real company, which you guys hopefully will relate to. And then we'll go to this team formation and then each team will actually rethink a real idea because you will be starting with the real team with whom you will be working for the next 10 weeks. And we don't want to kind of let you fix on one product or one idea. And part of today's lecture is why it's more important to basically spend more time initially looking at what you have thought. Is it really of value? Is it really a real business? Because you may be solving, you may have some nifty idea to go to Mars, but is it really practical? Can you do it within your lifetime? Can you make money out of it? So those are the kind of questions you want to answer because you want to make an impact, but to make an impact, you have to do something which is meaningful and can give you a real benefit. So I think so you'll actually work on going through with your team and you'll go through the business model canvas exercise and then at the end, you'll actually present in 2 to 3 minutes per team ideas to your pitch, to your peers and the mentors, and we will basically give you some feedback. So that's kind of today's agenda. I think so we start with a little bit of my background. So I'm just putting it here because you guys have known me in the outreach and all that, but I've been an entrepreneur for the last 25 plus years. So I worked in a large company. My first boss in the US after my master's was a Dutch guy. He was 6'4" guy. I actually interned with him for 3 months in Palo Alto in the street right out of Stanford. So I was the only non-American guy. There were 3 Dutch guys my age. He was around 35. And there's the secretary who was from Sonoma Valley. So we have 5 people working on something which is still relevant. I think you guys know what JPEG image is. So we were actually working for the initial card which would go in Macintosh at that time. So this was 1990. I learned so much in those 3 months that it left an impact in whatever I did later in my life. Because there was so much energy in that group, just like you have energy, the energy that Ryan brought in. So that was my first experience in startup. And after my PhD, I did some things in a large company. I was making algorithms for video compression. I was involved in what is called as MPEG-4. I think you guys may have played with MP4 files. So that's something that we were creating at that time. It was a very transformative area. I joined a company in Newport Beach, which was actually making modems. I think modems is probably, you guys don't know what modems are because initially when the internet first came out, I was in grad school and this was the biggest transformation we had done. We had a browser which came out of University of Illinois that everybody started using in schools. And that was, it transformed life. It was sitting in any corner of the world, you could actually see what was happening in another corner of the world. So that was one of the most transformational experience in our generation. You guys are going through some of it in AI, but that was game-changing. And the company I joined in Newport Beach that was making modems, which was making the connectivity possible. So at that time, the connectivity was around 26.6 kilobits per second, which today you cannot even transmit a small file. But we kind of thought like we have enough bandwidth that we can start sending videos in that small bandwidth. So we were making algorithms around basically how do you send large video files. This was mid-90s. But in that course of 3-4 years, I basically got to work with some of the brightest minds around the world. So we were working on standard bodies. I was traveling to Nokia, Dutch Telecom, and we actually made something which made it possible. And even today, the files that you see, the TikToks that you view, is basically based on that the fundamental compression technology. So I did it for 3-4 years, but then about 3 years later, in the same company right here in January in MacArthur, I had 3 other friends who were kind of doing different things in a large company, but we used to meet and said like, okay, all the dot-coms were happening around us. That was a very transformational area. Like everybody was so excited about internet that the world is going to change. People were becoming millionaires overnight. They were selling their companies for $100, $200 million. And we were all geeks. Like we had, there were 3 PhDs and a guy who was in marketing. I think the dot-com was there, but we really wanted to do something where we could contribute. And one of the things that was happening was internet was getting mature, and we were getting basically, there was a writing on the wall that the old way the communication was happening, what was used to be called as plain old telephone service. Probably all of you don't even know. When you used to dial a phone, you had to basically, there was a dial phone where you did this, and it used to create a specific noise. And that specific noise was a protocol that basically connected you with a PBX, and that's how the phone call was made. So that's how things were happening. But with internet, the whole infrastructure was going to change. So the vision that we came up with was that if the infrastructure changes, somebody got to find something to send these files in a more efficient way. So that was the large idea. But to execute it, we were all like late 20s, we didn't know what we didn't know, but we thought that we had the skill set to make a hardware which would make it possible if the infrastructure changes. So that was the vision. We didn't have a strategy, we didn't have any business degrees among us, but we started doing some simulation. We started moonlighting in one guy's garage who had a house, and we worked for 6 months, we came up with some results, and we kind of demonstrated enough, still in PowerPoint and simulations, that we could possibly do it because we had the skill sets to do it. But to do that, we needed tens of millions of dollars. And nobody was going to give us that kind of money to basically just buy a PowerPoint. So we kind of bounced around for about 3-4 months. Then 6 months later, one of my friends had sold a dot-com company in Silicon Valley. He knew somebody who worked for George Soros. George Soros is a big billionaire guy. He started, basically got famous for basically a lot of financial success. But he was starting a telecom-based venture fund in Silicon Valley. And we got connected to him. He flew to Orange County. He kind of saw something which nobody else was seeing, because we were bouncing around VCs to VCs. And he wrote the first $1 million check to us. We started our first office in a Laguna Hills parking lot in a small strip mall. We were just 4 people there. He wrote the check with a term sheet condition that you better move to Silicon Valley within 3 months. Otherwise, you won't exist. So we moved our headquarters there. The next round was led by Sequoia Capital, which is the biggest, one of the largest venture capital fund. And then we grew. We grew from 4 co-founders to around 300 people over the next 2 years. We executed, but we also got lucky. But we were basically making real product in the age where companies were making .com, sort of a vision based on .com. And then Intel Corporation, which was the largest semiconductor company at that time, bought us for almost $500 million. So from concept to finish, we grew to around 300 people. We made something which actually worked, When 9/11 happened, actually, I was in an underground lab in British Telecom because we were doing stuff to make it possible that how do you make intercontinental calls over voice over IP gateways. So it was a real stuff that we were making. It was a very good learning experience, but not every startup is successful. So what do you learn from this experience? So one of the key things that you will use today is, we were friends, just like you guys are when we first started. We had a vision. The vision was based on certain assumptions which were true, because there was a big transformation happening, there was need in the market. But the other thing was that we were making very, very complex thing, which was not going to be feasible without lot of capital investment, which is like tens of millions of dollars. So that was one of the biggest hurdle that we had to cross. People who saw our vision, they believed in that vision because the team we put together. So that's very important today that you will do. The team that you put together, each one of us brings something very, very valuable to whatever you do. So you have to seek to build, not just because you're friends, but you have to see what is the other person bringing to the table. We had very, very different complementary skill sets. One guy was a chip designer. The other guy was basically a chip architect. Like, he was basically good at building how silicon chips are made. My background was how are algorithms. Basically, what are algorithms? How do you compress a voice, video? How do you translate into a hardware? And the fourth guy had experience in marketing. So bringing these complementary skill sets is very, very important. And then you have to be true to your vision, but you will have problems because we didn't have any strategy. We need to get people who can complement, and you can. So this is what your mentors will do. Basically, they have years of experience. They will tell you what is wrong, what is right, because they have seen things fail. They've had their own companies, they have their own businesses. So they will guide you on how to do things correctly. So be open to feedback and then learn, and you make something and then you iterate. So I think I kind of skipped upon a few things. We can go to the next slide. So I think there's one thing we have done. So maybe, Mariana, if you can give one book per session, we couldn't get more. Yeah. So we should be distributing a book which you can share with your teams for now. We'll try to get more copies. But this is kind of the fundamental, the Lean Startup by Eric Rice. We kind of learned from it and how you build companies, because the whole principle here is you basically have the vision, but then you think about problem that you're solving, and then think about how can you validate the problem with the minimal effort. So what is called as the most valuable product, or the MVP. How do you make that? And then once you have that, depending on the kind of problem you're solving, instead of blindly going deeper into making it perfect, you first want to validate who's going to buy it, who's going to consume it, and get to the depth of seeing whether your assumptions are right, whether your product is right, whether your product feature is right. So that's the essence of the lean startups, or the lean startup philosophy. Like, you do enough, but you have to go validate it so that you are not living in a la-la land of your vision. You have to be grounded to reality. The sooner you do it, the better it is for your product. And the second part of the session, what we'll go is to show how this process is done. So maybe we can go a couple of slides. So I think I already talked about the vision, the strategy, and product. So all three are basically interrelated. The most important is you be true to your vision, basically understanding why you're doing something, what is the market that you're going after. The strategy is how do you execute, and the product is what are you making to execute it. And I think there's lots of optimizations involved in it, and in the lean startup terminology, pivot is a natural thing that happens. Can anybody tell me what pivot means? Yes. Yeah, to adapt, but in a startup, just like last week, you had a lot of ideas. How would you give an example? What would be a good example of a pivot? If you're doing a company or if you're part of a product, what happens in a pivot? Anybody else? Yeah.
You change your goals.
Change your goals. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. Transitioning your strategy. Yeah, so I think pivot can be at different levels. So I think obviously you can pivot your vision, you can pivot your strategy, or you can pivot your product. The easiest is, I think, you do one or two at a time. You don't change all three. Because if you've already spent a few weeks developing an idea, and you suddenly realize that the market is not there, but you already built something, so you find out what is the adjacent market that I can go to? Can I validate with those customers? So in that point, you're basically pivoting the market or you're pivoting your customers. You're still using your product. Sometimes what happens is you go deep into a market, you understand what should, I understand everything about mobile apps in the delivery space. You basically made something, but your original product is not working. So now you think okay, what is the next product I can make? Because I've talked to so many customers, I actually know more about their problems now than before I started. So you keep your market the same, but you change your product. So the pivot can be of different kinds, but the key idea is that you basically use what you have actually built, and you basically use your knowledge to go forward, but you are open to change. So I think that's the most important thing. And again, you kind of start with the idea, build, product. One important thing is measuring. So can somebody tell me, how would you articulate what measure means in the startup world? Anybody? What do you measure when you're building a product or when you're building a service? What does measure mean in the startup building process? Anybody? Yeah. Can you speak loud? Can we give measure risk? Yeah, I mean that's one thing, but there could be other things you could measure also. Anybody else has any idea? Yes.
Like the need of your product.
Measure the need of the product, measure risk. What else? Yes? Target market, yeah. So basically you measure whatever is possible. So I think when you're building a product, you're building, so one is are my features working? So from a product perspective, you're basically trying to make your product fit what the market needs are. So an essential sort of tenet of building a good product is you actually are building hooks in the product so that you can measure the efficacy of the product. How much value it's creating? Is it creating 2x efficiency? Is it creating 3x efficiency? If you have promised your customers it's so much better, is it delivering that? And in today's world, there are lots of ways to measure it. And so basically you have what are called as KPIs. KPIs stand for anybody?
This side.
Key.
This side.
P. What does PNI mean?
This side.
Yeah. Key performance indicators. So basically you have in your product KPIs for your product working, for your customer responding, for your risk, how much risk you're taking, and there was another thing here, right? How much you're connecting with customers. So basically all those things you have to quantify, because when you're doing a startup, it's not good enough to say, I have worked hard, my product is now working, but so what? If it works, that's not enough. Is the customer using it? How many customers are using it? how many customers are using it and then stopping to use it? What is the word for that? Can somebody tell me? Like TikTok had 1 billion users one day, and the second day it had only 500 million users. So TikTok had 500 million user, what would you say? It's called churn. Just like you basically churn something, if you're losing customers, you're basically having a churn. So one of the key KPIs for any software product, if it's a consumer-facing product, is a churn. Like, can you retain your customers? In any product or service, if you have one customer who's loving the product, who's referring the product to other people, that's called the Net Promoter Score. So if you talk about what are the companies you love, what are the companies and products that you love? Anybody, like you guys use a lot of products. If you talk about consumer products, what is one thing that you love in one of the products that you use? Anybody? I'm sure you guys use a lot of products, a lot of apps. And then anybody tell me, okay, I'll go ask, you've been quiet. What is the product that you love?
So I like for instance, I like my laptop, like laptops in general. They allow me to do schoolwork a lot.
Any specific brands of laptops?
Chromebooks, they're cheaper. They're passed out in school for free, and they get the job done really easily.
What about you?
I also like laptops, specifically like work, larger screen laptops that also have like AI capabilities like NPUs and whatnot. That way I can do more, yeah.
Like iPhones, because it's like very portable and like have many services, websites, apps, anything on them.
Okay, so 3 hardware products. Can anybody tell me about a software product?
Like now.
Yeah, app or
I like.
if I
I
change.
guess Google, that's a good app. I can like search up anything I have questions about and like it gives me like accurate responses.
Okay. What about you?
Do you like messaging apps?
Messaging apps? Anything in particular?
When you text someone on your phone.
Okay, one more. We'll go to Vivian and Trey. We want.
Yeah, so I also like Google because it's efficient. You can search something up.
Speak a little bit louder.
Yeah, I can search things up. It's efficient and it Google knows cited sources. So if I'm like doing like a research project, I can cite my sources sometimes as well.
Okay. What about you, Trey?
Yeah, so I think communication is really useful as software, like messages, and also calling as well. It's like very convenient and allows for communication across the world.
Any specific app or brand that you like?
I just like the classic calling app.
So I heard hardware, couple of computers. One guy wanted higher GPUs. So you probably like NVIDIA because they make the highest quality GPUs. You like iPhone, Apple, and communication. So a lot of voice and text communication. So I'm glad because that's something which I worked on 30 years back. So it's still relevant. I'm glad about it. Apple. So Apple, as I was telling, like people who love Apple, they swear by it. You go around the world, everybody, iPhone is a privilege and a brand name. If you go to China, you go to India, still you see something that was created as simple, like almost 20 years back by Steve Jobs. I think the beauty of that device was phones existed before that, phones have come after that. But the simplicity of usage is something which makes everybody loves it. Your grandma can use it the same way that you use it, or a 2-year-old can use it the same way. It's very intuitive. The human-to-computer interface is what makes it lovable. So you want to create products which people love, regardless of where they're coming from, what is their age, what is their backgrounds, and so on. So when people swear by Apple, they will have 10 devices in their house which are Apple. They have created an ecosystem. And people who love it, they tell other people to use it. So that's called as net promoter score. That's the best thing to have. Apple doesn't need to worry about when they come up with a new generation of iPhone 18. They needn't worry about who will buy it because they already have people who are going to buy it. So that's the position you want your product and brand to be. And it takes a lot, because it takes a lot to understand what your customers want. So I think in this initial phase, when you're coming up with your ideas, the most important thing is what you're making, is it going to wow your customer? Is it going to create loyal customers or not? And I'll give you an example later, a little bit later, which kind of shows that you don't need to boil the ocean. You don't need to make very, very complicated products. You start with one core problem, you solve it to one target customers. You start validating it, you start measuring whether your validations, your assumptions are working or not. And if you are going in the right direction, then you know that you are having success. And I think right now it's a little bit more abstract, but as you start working on it, we'll have follow-up sessions talking about how you go to customers and so on. You'll start understanding it. But the main thing is, do just enough so that you can get the right feedback to the customer. Your goal is to make a product like Apple or a product like Tesla, where you go into the car, you know how it will drive. And so those are the kind of products which have highest net promoter score. I'm kind of disappointed, nobody said TikTok. You guys are the TikTok generation. If I look at your phone, maybe 90% of the time you're using TikTok. So they created a product which is so viral because they had Instagram, they had YouTube before it, but they somehow found a way to please the customer by giving them something that they wanted in a very, very personalized fashion. The what for that was basically the technology that they built. So I think so, again, this is the concept of product market fit. I guess I'm already talking about it a little bit, but what does product market fit mean? One of the things is make what people want. The other is, if you go to the next slide, so just stay here. So, okay, you gave it up. So basically the product market fit consists of two parts, the product and the market. So the product is something that you can control, you can change, but you have no control about the market. You basically started with a problem that you're going to make the best phone possible. So that's what Steve Jobs' vision was. He already had a market. He couldn't change. I mean, at that time, this is again before you guys were born, there was a brand called Nokia, which I don't know if it still exists, but they had 90% of the market. They had the most sexy phones. Everybody was using it. It was iPhone was not even there. Whoever was not using Nokia, they were using BlackBerry. So half of the people were using Nokia, half of the people were using BlackBerry. iPhone didn't even exist. It came from nowhere. People dismissed it. They said, oh, this is a phone, just a vanity device which people will just use for their own fun. Nobody will use it in the business. 5 years later, the whole enterprise market changed to iPhone. So the guy had vision to change, basically address a market. He basically created the need. He actually understood what customers wanted, and he created a product market fit for a device which already existed 10 years before he entered the market. So going into an existing market, if you have a differentiated solution, is a good thing to do. Obviously, there are other things. To enter an established market, you have to be really, really good. Apple was not the best performing phone. The iPhone was not the best performing phone. One thing Steve Jobs knew, he understood what consumer wanted. He said, I'll create a phone which will be simple to use. The same thing. Your 2-year-old niece and your 80-year-old grandma can use the same phone. And I think that's sometimes the most difficult thing to understand. That's what good products do. They understand what consumers do, what consumers want, and so on. So maybe we go next slide. So I think so it's very important, as I said, like to keep on the market. Your vision should be on the market. Product is something that's easy to change in today's world. You guys are already using AI. So in today, pivoting product, experimenting with the product to see how your consumers are responding, that's the easy part, but you cannot change a market. So you have to have focused vision on, is my product meant for the market I want? If the market is not working, what am I missing? How can I measure what market is not liking? How can I measure what my product is not doing? Those are the things that you do to make a product market fit. So now, I think so this is another thing we'll talk in one of the sessions, hopefully later on. So this is a very famous graph of basically the life cycle of any product. So initially, you basically develop a product, you introduce to the market, you launch it, you learn a lot. So 90% of the time, which phase of this graph would you think the companies fail? So I'll start with this table first. So what do you think? Most companies, so it's a fact that 90% of the startups fail. But where would they fail when you're making a product?
I'd say in the beginning because it takes like a lot of time and effort to like first start whatever they're trying to like start basically.
I was going to say in the beginning as well.
That's the development phase.
I was going to say either the development phase or the growth phase because even if you have a good idea and you have the base for it, it's hard to actually grow and make it a mature product or company.
I would probably say like the launching phase, like right when they like introduce their product to the market. I would say that that's when they most likely fail because they can spend all this time developing their product, but once they put it out into the market to like to the world to buy, that's when they will see like where they went wrong and what people don't want to buy and why it's not working. I think either the development or the growth phase because it's kind of hard sometimes to see how the market's changing and really your product will only sell if users want to buy it. So I think you have to predict that.
So I'd also say the development phase because it's really hard to first start a product and like collaborate and make sure that it's really well for the introduction phase. And then let's say like maybe for the introduction phase, it's like what if you market it out, but the stock market changes so much? What if people's wants shift?
Your first phase, right? Yeah. So I think, the truth is companies can fail anytime, but historically, I think where people fail is the introduction phase, the launch phase, because in today's age, making products is becoming easier and easier with AI, with all the tools that are available, with the experience of people that you get together. I think when you launch a product, is it connecting with the market? Even if you have put 2 years into the product, when you start introducing the product, then you start realizing sometimes the product is too early, sometimes the product is too late. And I think getting the timing right, getting the zeitgeist of the consumer, like what is happening in the world, like how are the trends happening, is that right? Because that's again, product is under your control, market is not under your control. If you didn't do your research, maybe some of your assumptions were wrong. If your assumptions were wrong about your product, you can fix it quickly. if your assumptions were wrong about your market, it's very hard to fix. So that's where the iterations happen. 90% of the companies fail in this yellow, the first yellow phase, the second phase. And that's actually called, in startup parlance, crossing the chasm. There's a very good book by a very renowned author, we'll probably talk about it next time. But crossing the chasm is the journey between launch and growth is the toughest part for any startup, because that's where you figure out what was wrong with my product and what was right. So I think this is a good time where I'll give a personal story of, we can go to the next slide, Mariana. So, so this is, how many people know a company called Zoho? Anybody heard of it? Maybe your parents would have heard of it because it's a very boring enterprise product. So anybody heard of Salesforce? Maybe, yeah. You know what Salesforce does? I think it's basically a tool to yeah, so it's basically a tool for making your sales pipeline more efficient, tracking like who you have talked to and what the customer has said. So every company who is selling software, especially SaaS products, they are basically selling Salesforce. So I think in a very simplistic way, Zoho is poor man's Salesforce. So it's basically they create the same enterprise software, but they start basically giving very cheap. And so it was started by a person named, so anyway, so the stats of the company is they started in 1996, and I actually happened to just bump into it using it around 2009, 2010. So I was doing some company, I was asking actually one of our team members to use it, and they started complaining that this actually has a lot of bugs. So then I went and started using the software. I mean, the attractive thing about that software was that it gave 5 seats for free. So 5 people in your company could use it for free. So I actually went there because it was saving us money. I went there and started using the software myself. And actually, it did have a lot of bugs. So it was very frustrating. Then I Googled and said, who the heck created this software? And lo and behold, it was Sridhar Vembu. Sridhar Vembu is my college classmate. So he was actually my office mate at Princeton. We went there to do graduate school together. And he was actually founder of Zoho. And Sridhar Vembu is the last person I would have thought would have created Zoho, because this guy's PhD thesis was all math. Like nobody could understand it between just he and his professor. It was information theory and math. He actually, last I talked to him, he was working in Qualcomm in San Diego making 3G algorithms. So then I picked up phone, I tried to find out where he is. He was still in Silicon Valley in Pleasanton. I went and met him. I said, how come you basically created this software? So his story was actually, he quit Qualcomm in 1998 or 96. He went with his brother and started creating some middleware software for optical networking company, which has nothing to do with enterprise software. So he created this middleware, and when the dot-com boom was happening, a lot of companies, VCs were putting a lot of money in hardware which was making optical networking, because that would be transforming how communication would happen. And every one of those companies actually needed this middleware software which Vembu was selling to the startup. And this guy was very smart. He was a PhD from Princeton, and he knew what each company was doing. He said that I actually knew that every of these 150 companies was doing the same freaking thing. And he was making $200,000 a year licensing them the same piece of software. So in 4 or 5 years, he made a lot of money. And then July of 2000 happened. Does anybody know what happened in July of 2000? So July of 2000 was kind of the kiss of death for all the startups. So basically, VCs just shut down money. There were hundreds of companies that shut down in Silicon Valley. That was the dot-com bust that happened. Because we suddenly realized we have invested a lot on internet and .com and nothing was working out. So the first company that shut down were the optical networking companies. And Wembu lost 150 customers all in 1 month. So he said, I lost all my customers in Silicon Valley in 1 month. So he went from 150 multiplied by 200,000 a year to $0 revenue. But he had made enough because all his team was in India. He basically didn't take money from anybody. So for next 3 years, he basically started with the same software, started applying it all over the place. So he would basically make a small change, go to a trade show, show it. He said nobody actually was using it, whatever he was creating. It was not creating, there was no product market fit. And then 3 years later, around 2005, he said he went to a trade show. One Japanese guy came to their booth and started asking questions. And in the afternoon, there were like 5 Japanese guys that came and they started asking more questions. That's how he landed the first customer, which became the initial Zoho software. So the learning here is that I think what he did was he pivoted. So that kiss of death that you saw, that crossing the chasm, he didn't give up. He had something. He had a product. The market was not working out. He was basically trying out, going to these trade shows, talking to the customers, not having success. The good part was that he actually had the runway. He had created enough success with his consulting company initially. So he basically worked 3 years in perfecting what was working in Japan. And then he told me himself, like one of his words of wisdom to me was, basically, if you got one customer who loves you, world has how many billion people? 8 billion people. So it's easy to find people like that and then go and find the same customer. So basically, you have the ideal customer profile, what is called an ICP. You'll hear about it in the next class. If you have one customer, it's very easy to replicate and find in the world who else will like your product. But you got your product market fit. But it has to be that the market has to be big enough. And fast forward 20 years, this guy's company is basically generating $1.1 billion of revenue. He didn't take a single penny from any outside investors. He's worth around $30 million. So that's my claim to fame of my billionaire friend, Sridhar Venbu. He's actually gotten a lot of awards. He now lives in a village near Chennai in India. He runs this billion-dollar company from his village. So very inspirational story. There are lots of other things he did actually in terms of giving back. So he actually hired kids from village in India, taught them coding. So he doesn't hire coders in the US. He's actually training kids to learn coding and do it. Very, very inspirational story. And this was actually my classmate in Princeton. So I think the idea here is product market fit, understanding your customers, not giving up. And that brings to the last thing that I want to tell before we can go to the pivot thing. Mariana, maybe you go to the...
You want to skip?
So yeah, so I think, so we talked about pivot, and I think pivot is something which I think is required, and you will experience this in this class, the TYE program, because you start with one idea. It may work, but since we are in a compressed schedule of 12 weeks, we have to really pivot very, very fast because we don't have enough time to create different products within those 12 weeks. So that's why the first 2-3 weeks are very, very essential for you to see what idea you have, what group you have, what can you make, the MVP that you can make, and what markets you can target. And how do you measure whether your ideas are working or not? So one example that I'll give is, which you guys should relate to. So there's a company called Mercor. Before we go there, Mariana, I just want to ask, does anybody know what Mercor does? You guys can Google and find out, but so nobody has heard of Mercor, but basically this was started by three 18-year-old kids who were like you guys. Most of you are around 17, 18, 19. So basically, they were in college debate team together. They went to Stanford or one of the Ivy Leagues. They dropped out. They joined this Y Combinator a couple of years back in 2023. So the first project they did was a hackathon where basically they were building a simple service connecting developers from India, from Eastern Europe to companies in the US. So that was their hackathon idea. Somebody, I think Y Combinator has a big brand, so one of the VCs saw it. So basically, the next thing they did was basically took the idea and pivoted it to basically make it more AI-driven interviewing software. And that time they had enough that they got seed funded, and then, but 1 year later, they pivoted the thing to make it even more focused. So they basically now made the software specifically for companies who are looking for AI skill set. So that was their second pivot. And the third pivot was, which is a very recent thing in 2025, they realized that even bigger than this market is something which is happening in the world, because they had already they're talking to all these AI engineers. They felt that there's a much bigger need for companies like OpenAI or Grok or Google or Microsoft in basically tagging the databases that are needed to build larger AI models. So they basically pivoted the whole company to become work for hire, high-skilled workers who can tag databases for the training companies that would need it. That's the latest pivot. So within 2 years, they pivoted 3 times. But one of the things that they did was, and the result of the pivot is in the right-hand side, they started with a seed investment of 3.6. Today, they are valued at $10 billion. These are 4 kids your age, 2 years before. So they started with a hackathon idea on a weekend. 2 years later, they are valued at $10 million. What they did right was, at each step that they were progressing, they were basically not changing one thing. And one thing that they didn't change was the overall product that they were going after or the general market that they were going after. They were basically pivoting the nuances of the market that they were learning of what is getting hot and what is not hot. So if you go to the next slide, it will tell you what is the learning from this. And I think the key learning is what was working, changing one axis at a time. Just like I said, you can change product, you can change little bit of market, but don't change all the 3 things. Their vision still was more or less the same. Like they were trying to make something in the recruiting market, in the talent space. They kind of honed it again and again, and then finally gained traction. So every step they were actually gaining traction and doing things which basically help create more value for them. So I think that's 3 things take away from today's, I think what I was talking about. The first thing was basically what is required in the company is vision, strategy, and product. Vision is the foundation. So you basically take a vision, and you form a group to go there. Product is something that can change. It has basically a lot of malleability. You can basically go, especially in today's world. Strategy is something which is very, very important. You have to learn it the hard way. You have to basically keep your eyes focused on what? Focused on the market and the customer, because that's kind of the true north for you. Because whatever you're creating, if you're measuring it right, you're being honest, that's the most important thing. So that's the first. The second is product market fit is an iteration. Market is not under your control, product is under your control. So do whatever you can to basically go to the market and basically see whether what you're creating is generating enough value, when you're measuring the right things. And the third thing is, don't be afraid to pivot. But when you pivot, pivot intelligently, because you want to learn what you have, you want to keep what you have learned, but you also be open to new ideas so that you're basically increasing your value as you go up. So I think that's kind of the three tenets of how you build startups, and you will all experience this as we go through this program. The second half, maybe a smaller section, I'll let Mariana first speak a little bit about herself and also take you through some exercise which will be very important for what you do in the next session today.
Thank you, Andre. Okay, how are you guys doing? I see some sleepy faces. Stand up real quick. Stand up. Okay, we're gonna do wiggle arms, wiggle arms. Okay. Give me 3 deep breaths, okay? We'll do one together. Ready? 1, inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Okay, you guys can sit down. Okay, hopefully you guys feel a little better. I'll give you a very, very brief background about me and then we'll jump into the actual content. Okay, I don't have a fancy slide, but that's okay. Much like you guys, very young, I graduated Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in 2022. Yeah, Mustangs. Okay. And studied industrial engineering, and I always had a passion for entrepreneurship ever since I was really little. And what I always encourage kids is like, think about when you were like 8 years old. What did you like to do? For me, that was bossing my 3 younger brothers around and helping run a business out of our little play fort. So fast forward several years, while I was at Cal Poly, I did several startup competitions. We were ranked 3rd place in one of them, 2nd place in another, and it was just so exciting to be a part of this environment. And so after I graduated, I worked at Callaway Golf for several years as a project manager, but I still had that desire of entrepreneurship in me. And so in the last 2 years, I've pivoted my career path into entrepreneurship again. And so I'm actually working on 3 startups. As entrepreneurs, your brain's always going all over the place and trying to think of different things. So I have one startup that I'm working on right now with AI recruiting, where we use AI to read your emotions of your face when you're doing interviewing and able to pick up, do you really want this job? Or is it like, okay, I'm just doing this checkbox, something. And then the candidates get to see this, and then both the interviewers, they have access to this on their side, and they're actually trying to help find a better culture fit for you. Where are you going to be when you want to be at a place for long term? Not just, okay, I'm just here for my 1 to 2 years and that's it and moving on. So we're really trying to help connect people to businesses. Then one of the other startups I'm working on, I have a logistics business out here in LA. I'm working on with a couple other co-founders. Pretty boring stuff. We just moved from the Port of Long Beach and repack it for customers, but kind of given my IE background, that's in my wheelhouse, so that's like my bread and butter, so to speak. And then I'm also working on a energy storage business with solid state batteries on the side, but just more on the sales side of things, so pretty boring, but I won't bore you guys with the details further. So we'll go ahead and jump into the BMC. How many of you guys have heard of the BMC outside of today? Does anybody want to take a guess what the acronym means? Okay, so what is a business model? A business model is essentially something that describes all the parts of a company that are necessary to make money. Don't we all want to make money? I would assume so. Okay. So this is the business model canvas. It's made up of several parts. You have your customer relationships, your customer segments, revenue streams, channels, key resources, cost structure, key partnerships, key activities, and your core at the center, your value proposition. So we'll kind of go through each of these and walk through what they need. This is going to be your bread and butter for making your businesses. So we'll have an exercise when you guys break out into your teams. You guys will each make one of these. But first, let me describe to you what each of the components are. So we'll start with the value propositions. Does anyone want to take a guess of what your value propositions are? Yes, three? That's a good option, yeah. Initial idea. What else? Okay, this guy, side. Somebody. Yes, Devin. Yes, that's a good one.
I said something that makes your company different from the competitors.
Yes, that's a good answer.
Anybody else?
How accessible it is to the target audience.
Yeah, that's a good one. So, value proposition is basically how are you delivering value to your customer? How are you different from any other business out there? What type of needs are you trying to meet for your customer? So there's a whole bunch of different characteristics here. For the time's sake, I won't go over every single one. We'll have these in the slides, and they'll be in the Google Drive. But just to name a few, it's like you can have your characteristics of design, price, how are you the cheapest, accessibility, and so forth. Then the next one that we have is customer segments. So customer segments are the people that you are directly trying to help. So you might ask, okay, who are these people that you're making value for? Who are your most important customers that you want to help? So this could be you're targeting a very specific demographic, or maybe you're trying to solve a big world problem. But that's what would go into this bucket. Then you have your customer relationships. Customer relationships are essentially how you're interacting with your customer. So this might be, let's say if you have a service and you're helping, let's say, elderly people on the site. Your direct service would be that face-to-face interaction that you're making with them. Or let's say you're an app-based. Most of your connection to your user is just going to be virtual. So that's what you would put in that bucket. Channels. So channels are how you are reaching your customer. So this could be through a website, through a platform, through an app. Maybe if you have a storefront, this would be through your store. And then you would have to ask yourself, okay, which ones are going to be your most cost effective? Which ones do you know you'll get the most traction by being? Is it going to be best if you're doing face-to-face with them? Or is it going to be better if it's all just digital transaction? Then we have revenue streams. So anyone want to take a guess what revenue streams are? Yes.
Like how you're earning money.
Ding, ding, ding. Exactly. Yes. So how you're earning money. Anybody else want to add on what it might be?
How much one is willing to pay to invest in the company?
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? One in the back? No? Okay. So, yes. How are you going to make money? You have your revenue streams. It's basically your streams of money. So what are people willing to pay for your product? How much are they currently paying for an alternative that they're trying to use to meet their needs? That'll help you benchmark how much they might be willing to pay for your service. And then there's a whole bunch of different types of revenue streams. Just to mention a few, you might have a subscription service, you might have the true product and just the fixed price of the product, or you might have some type of customer dependent where it fits, or you can have yield management. There's a whole bunch out there, but I won't go into detail of every single one. You guys can look at those later. Then we have key activities. So key activities are essentially the main things that you have to do in order for your business to work. So let's say you're developing an app. What would be one of the key activities you guys have to do? In the back. Coding? That one's good. Yes, coding is definitely a key activity to make it work. Yes. What was that? Design. Yes. Testing. That's a good one. Okay.
I was about to say this.
Testing. Okay, you guys are both good. Yes. Any others? Prototyping. Yes, that's another key activity you have to do. So it has to do with all the little functions of things that you have to do to make your business work. So let's say another example. Let's say you're doing apparel manufacturing. One of the things that you have to do to get your product on the shelves is you have to work with manufacturers to make your product. Then we'll jump to key resources. So what are key resources? Key resources are the key things that you need in order to make your business work. So let's say if you're making those shirts, like you're gonna need fabric in order to make your product. Or if you are creating, let's say a brand new invention, you're likely going to need to patent this so nobody else steals it. So you're going to need intellectual property. Other pieces that you might need capital, you might need financing in order for this to work. And then the most important part is people. You have to have people for your team to work. Like Anurag was saying earlier, it's so important who you're picking to be on your team, because those are your key resources that are going to carry you from the very beginning of ideation until you're selling your product. Then cost structure. Does anyone want to take a guess what the cost side of things is? Yeah.
Like expenses, like research and development expenses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are really good ones. Any others? Yes.
How much profit you make?
Opposite side of that.
How much you're-
Yeah, how much are you losing to be able to make your business run? So it's like, oh, I know I need to have, let's say, a database running in the background for my app, and I have to pay for that service. I have to pay for employees and have salaries to cover. Those are all the things that would get put inside of your cost structure. And the last one that we have is key partnerships. So who are your key partners? Key partners are those key relationships that you make. They may be internal, they might be external, that are critical to your business functioning. So let's say, for example, you have a partnership with your app with, let's say, the Google store, so that they can market your app for you. Or you have some type of other agency that's doing the marketing for you. That would be a partnership. Okay. So I'm gonna have you guys do an exercise, and we're gonna do this together. So you guys are welcome to chime in, write it down. There's also one of the links in the drive where you guys can fill this out yourself, or you guys can just listen along. Either way works. So how many of you guys have heard of the app Belly before? Okay, we got a couple foodies in the room. How many of you guys would actually consider yourselves to be foodies? Okay, I love you guys. That's awesome. So if you've not used Belly before, it's an app that helps to solve a modern dilemma with dining. Essentially, you go and search on Google. You might be like, oh my goodness, there's too many options. I have no idea what to pick. Also, Yelp reviews, I don't know if I really trust them. You see those signs outside and they say, oh, give us a Yelp review and we'll give you a $5 discount. I don't know if I trust that. And then no personalized choices where to eat. You might just be, if you do a random search online, you're gonna get thousands of options, but are they really tailored to what you like? I don't So that's where Belly comes in. So they've created an app where they are able to track and share your preferences of restaurants around where you live or wherever you're traveling to. And then to actually discover within the platform, you'll get personalized recommendations based on your taste, based on your friends that you're matched up with on the app. And then what really makes it different than, say, like another Yelp is the social layer of it and the gamification side. So essentially, it works like TikTok or Instagram would, and you can match up with your friends on there and share what type of restaurants you've been to, what your feedback is on it, and then the gamification side is that you actually get scores for how many times that you're ranking a restaurant and how many places that you're looking into and how many friends that you're connecting with on the platform. So it becomes an incentive to want to constantly be on the platform. And users have reported spending hours on the platform just to curate the perfect responses to things and share with their friends. So, let's see, quick stats about it. So, this company hasn't been around that long. They started back in 2021. It was 2 students from Harvard. Their user base is, they have definitely pinpointed what their target market is. Most of their users, 80% of their users are under the age of 35. So they're targeting kind of those Gen Z millennial age. And then as far as how wide this has gone, they have over 75 million reviews logged in the platform across 30,000 cities. That's a lot for a brand new company. So we're gonna do this one together. We're gonna do the BMC for Belly. So let's go ahead and do the value proposition together. What do you guys think, based on the background, is their value proposition? And you guys are welcome to use your phones, use ChatGPT, and then give me answers in 15 seconds, okay? Ready? Go. Okay. You guys can go ahead and take a 15-minute break, and then after that, we're going to get into activity time.
Future entrepreneurs, you are needed back into the office.